Right, ready to dive in. We're taking a look at Indian intelligence today, specifically the life of this former RAW agent, Lucky Bisht.
And let me tell you, this is not your average spy story. This guy, Lucky, his journey takes us from like the intense training camps of the Israeli Special Forces to the harsh realities of Indian prisons, and then we get to his time with RAW and the NSG.
Wow, okay, so we're talking about a guy who's seen some things, right? Most of us can't even imagine. So where do we even begin with a story like this? How does somebody even start down this path?
Well, for Lucky, it all started with family. His grandfather was a soldier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he died in the 1971 war with Pakistan.
Oh, wow.
Which, I mean, you can imagine left a huge mark on him, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that legacy of service, it was always there.
Right, but it wasn't like he was like dreaming of being a soldier as a kid.
You're right. No, not really. It sounds like, honestly, a bit of serendipity. Or maybe, maybe fate played a role. He was living with his aunt in Jaipur, just going to school like a regular kid, when the Army announced this special recruitment program specifically for families with a history of military service.
So the opportunity kind of just fell into his lap.
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay. But something tells me they weren't just handing out uniforms, right?
Yes.
What was that selection process like?
Intense is an understatement, believe me.
Okay.
We're talking training with the Israeli Special Forces.
Wow.
Picture this. You're in the middle of the desert, 4 a.m., your day starts with a marathon, and that's the warm-up.
Wow, talk about operating under pressure. I could barely make coffee before my morning jog. So what was the point of all this? What kind of soldier were they trying to create?
They were looking for the best of the best snipers.
Okay.
And not just any sniper. Lucky talked about having to hit targets, get this, the size of a candle flame from over 100 meters away.
No way.
After running for miles. So it wasn't just about physical endurance, it was about the mental resilience you need to perform under that kind of pressure. And that's crucial, especially in the intelligence world.
Yeah, that's incredible. That level of precision, I mean, it makes my hands sweat just thinking about it. And then on top of all that, there was this whole code red thing he talked about, which sounds like straight out of a spy movie.
Yeah, it was all about pushing these recruits to their absolute limit to forge that teamwork, but also a fierce sense of competition at the same time. So they'd pair up the top performer with the weakest link.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And the stronger one, they were responsible for making sure they both succeeded.
What?
Sometimes, like literally dragging the other one along.
So it's not enough to excel on your own. You have to be able to elevate those around you, even in the most extreme circumstances. Talk about pressure.
Exactly. This system, it was designed to weed out anyone who wasn't completely dedicated, to force them to rely on each other while still proving themselves as individuals. This wasn't just basic training, this was a crucible, forging that mental toughness that you absolutely need for a career in intelligence.
It sounds brutal, but I can see how it would create this different kind of bond, right? The shared experience that stays with you. So we have Lucky, this highly trained soldier, and suddenly he's thrown into a whole different kind of battle, the Indian prison system.
Yeah, talk about a crash course in a different kind of survival.
It's a world away from the discipline and structure of his military training.
Completely different world. And he ends up accused of this double homicide. Two high-profile gangsters, Raju Bargahi and Amit Arya, taken down with a single bullet.
Wait, a single bullet? That's quite a detail. It almost sounds like, well, the work of someone with Lucky's particular set of skills.
Exactly. That's what the police were thinking, too. They found a holster at the crime scene that matched the type of gun he used. And, local intelligence pointed to him as the only one capable of making that kind of shot.
Okay, so they suspect him because of his skill set. But was there any actual evidence, like a motive? Anything beyond just, this guy's good, maybe too good?
That's the thing. The motive's always been unclear. Couldn't find a direct connection between Lucky and those gangsters. No apparent reason for him to target them. But they still held him for 4 years.
4 years. Just on suspicion.
4 years. And not in just one facility. He was shuffled between 11 different prisons across North India.
11.
11. Often kept in solitary confinement, denied basic necessities. It seems like a deliberate attempt to break him, get a confession out of him, even if it meant,
fabricating one.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds just awful. Almost Kafka-esque.
Yeah.
Like something out of a nightmare.
Yeah.
What was life actually like inside those prisons?
Well, Lucky describes a pretty grim reality, a far cry from the world of disciplined training he knew from the military. cramped cells, constant lack of sunlight, psychological torture.
Okay.
And rampant corruption was just the norm. Even basic necessities, decent food, a phone call,
Yeah.
those all came at a steep price. The whole system was designed to exploit the vulnerable.
So it wasn't just the physical deprivation, but also the psychological manipulation, the just utter dehumanization that really wore people down.
Absolutely. He talks about prisoners being routinely forced into menial labor, bullied into becoming someone's muscle, even subjected to sexual assault.
Oh, God.
And if you complained, who were you going to complain to? The guards were often part of the problem, turning a blind eye or even actively participating in the abuse.
It's horrifying. It's a very grim picture of the Indian prison system, especially for those without money or influence.
Yeah, and this is where Lucky's personal story intersects with these larger systemic issues. His experience really exposes the flaws in the Indian justice system, where your experience is often determined by your wealth and connections.
It's a stark reminder that justice isn't always blind. And for many, the legal system can feel like this impossible maze designed to keep them trapped.
Exactly. Makes you wonder how many innocent people are in those conditions simply because they lack the resources to fight back.
It's a chilling thought. So after enduring 4 years in that system, you'd think Lucky would want to put this chapter behind him, find some kind of normal life again.
You'd think so, right? But that's not what happens. Instead of retreating, he dives headfirst into the shadowy world of international espionage.
So this experience, this crucible, doesn't break him. It almost seems to forge him into something different. It's like he's seen the darkest parts of the world, and instead of shying away, he just dove straight in. It's incredible. So how do you go from, like, surviving prison to operating in the world of international espionage?
For Lucky, it seems less like a conscious decision and more like just the next logical step. Remember, we're talking about a guy who already had elite training from the NSG, and then those years in prison, well, they probably gave him a different perspective.
You think?
Oh, yeah. I mean, talk about a crash course in human nature.
Yeah.
The motivations, the vulnerabilities, those are the things intelligence agencies look for.
It's like those years, as brutal as they were, it became like a whole other training ground.
Absolutely. Sharpened his instincts, prepared him for a world where the lines aren't always so clear.
Right, right.
And he doesn't hold back. He pulls back the curtain on this world, like how agencies like RAW really operate.
Yeah, it's not all, gadgets and explosions like in the movies.
Not even close. Lucky stresses meticulous planning, research, analysis, understanding the target, sure, but also the whole world they operate in.
It's about connecting those dots.
Yes. Finding those tiny details, the ones that seem insignificant, but can unravel an entire operation or expose a weakness.
And he gives an example, right, about honey trap schemes.
Oh, yeah. And he specifically talks about those targeting Indian military personnel.
Wow.
It just shows how easily somebody can be manipulated, especially now with everything online.
Like, you think you're being careful, then someone starts a conversation.
Yeah.
Seems harmless enough, right? But they're really after information.
Exactly. Anyone can be vulnerable, no matter how vigilant you think you are.
It's kind of creepy when you think about it.
It is, and it speaks to how sophisticated these agencies are. They exploit technology, sure, but also just human desires for connection, for love even.
That is a chilling thought. And it's not always about recruiting people, right? Sometimes it's about dealing with, well, people who betray their own country.
Right.
Like Lucky mentioned the case of Ravindra Sharma, that high-ranking Indian official who was caught spying for the CIA.
The classic double agent. Thinks they'll be rewarded for their treachery, but, it rarely ends well for them.
No honor among thieves, right?
Yeah.
So what happened to this Sharma guy? What happens in those situations?
Well, the details are kind of murky, like they often are in this line of work, but
Right.
it's never stated outright. But Lucky, he alludes to this, darker side of the intelligence world, sanction assassinations. When someone is deemed a serious enough threat, they have to be.
Removed.
Yeah.
So we're talking government-sanctioned hits, targeted killings. It's a whole other level.
It is. And, it brings up a lot of questions about the ethics of it all. When is a threat big enough to justify taking a life? Where do you draw that line?
Those are tough questions. Ones that most of us, thankfully, never have to even think about. But it makes you wonder about the price of security, right?
Yeah.
How far are we willing to go to protect our interests?
Exactly. And these questions, they become even more important in today's world with all the geopolitical stuff going on. Like, Lucky specifically points to China.
Right.
their ambition, their influence. He sees India on the front lines of this
They
struggle.
struggle with some really high stakes.
No doubt. It's a whole chess game out there, these agencies making moves and counter moves.
And he seems to think India's role in all this, it's changed. That they're not content to just sit back anymore.
Right, there's a new assertiveness.
A willingness to maybe ruffle some feathers to get what they want.
Yeah, you could say that.
So Lucky's story, like you said, it's more than just a spy thriller. It's a look at the real cost of espionage, the sacrifices, the moral compromises. But it's also a story about resilience, about coming out the other side changed.
Absolutely. And, the big question, the one that really stays with you, is how do we balance the need for security, for protecting ourselves, with our own morals? Where is that line, and what happens when it gets blurred?
It really makes you think. Well, that's a pretty fascinating look at the world of Indian intelligence. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious.